Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming and joining us for the learning of Torah Hashem, Be'ezus Hashem Yisbarach, as we broadcast from our shul, Agudas Yisrael Beis Zev, in Fairways, Lakewood. As always, we give Hakar Satayv to TorahAnytime.com for giving us a huge platform to teach Torah in 187 countries. And we thank Chazak for letting people know about the shir. Tonight's shir is being dedicated by my very close Talmud, Rabbi and Mrs. Yoel Klugman. I texted him this morning that I didn't have a sponsor for the shir. I asked him if he wanted to sponsor, and he said yes, and then I suggested that it should be a memory of Rabbi Wallerstein. Today was his shloshim, the giant of a man, Rabbi Wallerstein, who all of Klal Yisrael misses so much, and he said, what a good idea. So we'll learn Leilei Nishmas, Rabbi Zechariah Shimon, ben Rabbi Yitzchak HaKoyen, his neshama should have an aliyah. He should be a Me'elis Yosher for his family, for his dear Rebbe Esti, for all of us and all of Klal Yisrael. The last mamish, while I was eating something at about 8:20 to 8, I got a text from another dear Talmud, Beirich Goldwasser, who said that his grandmother had an accident and she needs a surgery. So we're going to learn for her, for Shana Freda Bas Gisha Fega. Shana Freda Bas Gisha Fega. She should have a refuah shalema, a successful surgery, and good health, and a quick recovery. B'sei Shar Cheli Yisrael. Today was Yom HaMiyuchas. Yom HaMiyuchas is a good day for the shloshim of somebody like Rabbi Wallerstein. It's not a good day that we don't have Rabbi Wallerstein, but talking about a person that was a miyuchas, I can't think of a better example than Rabbi Wallerstein. The number one reason why it's called Yom HaMiyuchas is stated in the Aruch HaShulchan, and that is because it was on Rosh Chodesh that Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, tell Klal Yisrael, v'atem tiyu mamleches kayanim v'goy kadosh, and he told it to us on the second day of Sivan, which is Yom HaMiyuchas. That's the day that we were let to be known that we are people of great yichus. We're a mamleches kahanim, we're a nation of priests and a holy nation. The fact that we're a Goy Kadosh means that we're a nation that has the directive to be not just good on the surface, but to be holy through and through. That's what it means to be holy. That means that we're a people that govern our minds as well as our actions. That way we become holy. And therefore we have laws like not to hate people in our heart. We have laws like not to covet in our heart. We have laws like not to bear a grudge, because we're a Goy Kadosh. We're capable of that. That's what it means to be a miyuchis. And that we're mamleches kahanim. Mamleches kahanim means, you'll say to yourself, we're not mamleches kahanim. Only the Kahanim are Kahanim. What does it mean, a Kohen? A Kohen is a person that ministers to Hashem. We all minister to Hashem. That means that when we go to shul and we daven, we're ministering to Hashem. We're serving Hashem. You know, there's a word that is really goyish. Yidden don't use the word, but it's a good word. People go to shul to worship. Now, we don't use that word. But the truth of the matter is, it's important to go to shul to worship. I'll never forget that when they built Rabbi Wein's new shul in Monsey, they asked him what he wants to be involved in. And he said the seats. And they said to him, well, what does that mean? You want special seats? He says, I don't want the seats to be too comfortable. That's what he said. Because if the seats are too comfortable, people will go to sleep. We don't go to shul to sleep. We go to shul to work. Now, I know that's an interesting thing. People don't think in those terms. They don't think about going to work when they go to shul. But that's the pasuk. The pasuk says, "U'la'avdoi b'chol levavchem." To work, ezo avodah she believe every yom ezu tefillah. When you go to shul, you work. When they're laning, you work to concentrate on what the Baal Korah is saying. If you don't work, then you're in shul. It's like you're going to the. Did you ever notice that sometimes you're in Gourmet Glatt and it reminds you of the dentist? You're trying to figure out, why is Gourmet Glatt reminding me of the dentist? And then you realize they're playing the same background music as your dentist. And if you don't watch out, when you're in shul, it's background music. It's supposed to be more than background music, but that's work. So that's a mamleches kahanim, and that's why it's miyuchas. Now I'm going to say this very quickly. I said it already here in the shul between mincha and mar, but it's worth repeating. You know, there are those that say that the Yom HaMiyuchas, the second day of Sivan, is a yichus because it's sandwiched in between Rosh Chodesh on one side and the Shloshis Yemei Agbala, the 3 days of preparation, on the other side. And anything that's sandwiched in between two good things has to be special. That's what it says. Godol Deya, great is Deya, knowledge, because it's said between two names of Hashem. Kel Deyois Hashem. It's Gemara. So it must be big, because if it's said in between two names of Hashem, so it has to be big. If I showed you a picture, and in the picture on one side of a person is Ramosha, and the other side of the person is Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky. The person in the middle is not a janitor. The person in the middle of Ramosha and Rabbi Yaakov maybe was Rabbi Yelush from Satmar. But if somebody is in the middle of Ramosha and Rabbi Yaakov, he's a big man. Right? So therefore, the one in the middle is if it's in the middle of two important days, two important sets, so then it has to be a miyuchas. But the pshat that I like the most is the fact that from Rosh Chodesh Sivan until Yud Gimel of Sivan, every day is special. There's Rosh Chodesh, there's Shlosh Me'agbala, there's Shavuos, and then there's the Yemei Tashlumim, the days that we make up the carbon of Shavuos. The only day that's regular is Bei Sivan. That's the only normal day. And the lesson is that to be normal is a big yichus. That's a big thing. To be normal is a big yichus. I have my own favorite saying that in a hand, the tallest finger is the middle finger. The shortest fingers are the pinky and the thumb. That's because the tall way in life is the middle way, the normal way. Extremes are small. The tall way in life is the middle way, the derech ha'emtza, what the Rambam calls the shvil hazav. Okay, let's get down to business over here. And I do not have a sponsor for next week's shir. Parshas Nasa, it's a very chashuv shir. It's coming right after Yom Tov, and I don't have a sponsor for that. So if anybody wants to sponsor, 718-916-3100, 718-916-3100. I can't use up calling my Talmidim and saying I don't have a sponsor. I can't do that too often. 718-916-3100. So it says, the Nasi Livnei Gad, the Nasi of the Shevet of Gad, was Eliasaph ben Reuel. Now, the Chidah asks a kasha. The Chidah says that in the beginning of the Parsha, it says that he's El Yosef ben Deuel. So why over here does it switch to Reuel? It's a kasha of the Chidah. And the Chidah gives a fascinating answer. And he says he's giving this answer according to the explanation of the Imrei Noyam. The Imrei Noyam tells us that in the chelik of God was buried Moshe Rabbeinu. It was a big thing. You know, where a tzaddik is buried brings tremendous bracha. I remember when it was when the Satmar Rebbe, you know, the Satmar Rebbe was such a big man. What he changed, what he created, you could imagine that the Rabbeinu Shalom sent a train into Gehenim to bring out the Satmar Rebbe. He sent a special train into the death camp to bring out the Satmar Rebbe. Because the Satmar Rebbe was needed. He changed the complexion of so many people in America, both with his Torah, with his chesed, with his outlook. So I remember when the Satmar Rebbe was nifter, it was a big thing that they didn't bury him in Eretz Yisrael. They buried him in Monroe. And it brought a blessing into a shtot in Klal Yisrael. So Shevet God was Zeicha that Moshe Rabbeinu was buried in their chelik. Now what's the reason? So the Imrei Noyam says such an interesting reason. The Imrei Noyam says that when Moshe Rabbeinu appointed Dan as the head of his degel, they had banners, and it was a big covet to be appointed as the head of the degel, and the head of the degel was Dan. Now, God was not appointed as the head of his degel. Says the Imrei Noyam, God could have made a big to-do about it. He could have made a big stink about it. God could have said, wait a second. There's something that's not equitable over here. Dan was the firstborn of Bilhah. He said, I'm the firstborn of Zilpah. If Dan was appointed the head of his degel, why shouldn't I be appointed the head of my degel? I'm the firstborn of Zilpah. But he was quiet. He didn't make a fuss. And because he didn't make a fuss, he was Zeicha to have Moshe Rabbeinu buried in his chelik. And he was Zeicha, that's why he was called Reuel. That he was the friend of the El, the mighty one, the Elei Haaretz, Moshe Rabbeinu. And he was Zeicha to have, that's why he was switched from Deuel to Reuel. He was Zeicha to have Moshe Rabbeinu buried in his chelik. Says the Mefarshim over here, that we see over here the meaning of Lo matzasi leguf toiv mishtika. I've never found anything better to the body than shtika. Imagine throughout the millennia, anybody that learns, we see that God is praised as Reuel, the friend of Moshe Rabbeinu. Why? Because he didn't make a fuss. He didn't make a fuss of the covet that he didn't get the head of the degel like Dan did. Now contrast that to what happened with Korach. We know that Korach went berserk because he thought he's supposed to get the Nesias instead of Elitzaphan ben Uziah. And he didn't look away. He went berserk, and he ended up getting swallowed alive straight to Gehenim with Anoshim, Noshim, V'taf, because he wasn't quiet. It's not easy to be quiet. You have to know that it's easy to say a shir, and to say that you get rewarded for this. But these are things that people, this talent, a person has to make a lifetime campaign. Why do I say that? It's a beferish Gemara in Chulin. The Gemara says in Masechtas Chulin, Ma umnosai shel adam ba'olam hazeh. What should be a person's job in this world? Now, if you would ask me that question, I have many answers to tell you. I could say that your job in this world is to train how to fight the Yetzer Hara. I could say that your job in this world is to learn how to daven, v'ani tefillah. I could say your job in this world is to find every moment when you could learn Torah. Gemara says in Masechtas Chulin, Ma umnosai shel adam ba'olam hazeh yaseh atzmai ke'ilain. Make yourself like a mute. When my daughter was growing up, she had a friend who was a selective mute. Interesting, she would only talk to my daughter, my baby, my youngest daughter, Yocheved. Sometimes a family would need to know something, they would call over my daughter. She was a selective mute. Baruch Hashem, she's married, she grew out of it. But the Gemara says we should train ourselves to be selective mutes. We should know when to zip it. It's a talent. It's not something that you're going to have if you're going to need it without training. Somebody says an insult to you. we don't like to take things. We don't want people to step on us. So we answer back. It says Tzadikim ne'lovin ve'eina nolvin, shoymim cherpasan v'shoifskim, aleim oimer akasa v'oyavav kitzeitz hashemesh b'gvurasai. Those that love him are like the sun going out in its might. We use the sun as a metaphor because the sun, when the moon says there can't be two kings on the same throne, the sun didn't answer. And it's considered might, not meek, but might. It says that when somebody does this, they could ask Hashem for a big request when they're a mavater. But it takes tremendous training. Now, we know that there are people that are called the Mekaimei Olam. They uphold the world. We know that there's such people around that hold up the world. We learned this from Avram Avinu. When Avram Avinu prayed for Sodom, it says, I never saw this in a medrash, but I have a Kabbalah from Rav Miller, that in Sodom and Amorah there were 3 million people. There's a medrash like that. I don't know where the medrash is, but there's such a medrash that there were 3 million people in Sodom and Amorah. 3 million people. That's a lot of people. 3 million people. There isn't even that amount of people in Lakewood. 3 million people. There's a lot of people on the 9, but it's not 3 million people. Right? And Hashem said, if there would be 10 tzaddikim b'seicha ir, I'll save all 3 million people. These are mekaimei olam. They uphold the world. Shteit in Pasuk, it's an interesting Pasuk. Toile eretz al blima. Now the Pasha, the Pshat in the Pasuk is remarkable in itself. See, we appreciate it because we have telescopes. They didn't have in those days. But we look in the sky, and we see the earth is hanging in nothingness. That's the Pashup Pshat in the Pasuk. Toile eretz al blima. The earth is hanging there on nothing. There's no pedestal. You have a globe in your office. It's sitting on a pedestal. The earth is holding in nothing. It's not plummeting through the sky. It's It's not thrown into an unstoppable orbit. It's hanging. It's perfectly hanging on. But the Gemara says the pasuk means something else. Homiletically, the Gemara says, "Eina oila miskayim ela b'misha boilim piv b'shas meriva." The world is upheld by somebody who could shut their mouth in the face of a quarrel. Of course, a good marriage is good because at least one of the spouses has this talent. You're lucky if your partner has this talent. They don't need to answer back. There's a famous saying, there's a dance called a tango. And the saying goes, it takes two to tango. You can't do the dance of a fight if one doesn't participate. No, it's not worth it. Not worth it. The world survives on such people. That's how important this trade is. Eina oila miskayim. You know, I could think of many important things. Oh, the world depends on that. Somebody like a rechnitz that gives so much tzedakah and makes a kiddush Hashem. Okay, mekayme oilam. A person gives an extra $100 for every kol man before Yom Tov, and gives several $1 million. Mekayme oilam. A person is learning in the base of Medrash Yom Balayla, and he's mekayme oilam. No, eina oilam miskayim ela b'misha boilim piv b'shas meriva. Yeah, the reason why this is such a big chiddush, is because we're used to thinking that there is greatness in action. This is not action. This is doing nothing. There's greatness in doing nothing. There's greatness in doing nothing. Not always is it that way. If you see somebody do something wrong and you're quiet, that's not a good thing. Lives are ruined because there are certain rabbanim that are treated terribly because the silent majority just keeps quiet. And they let people get away with things. That's no good. Silence is not always good. But many times it is. When it comes to somebody else's covet, it might not be good. But when it comes to your covet, it's good. When the Gaon said the famous acronym of Bereshis, that Beis is B'tochen, Reish is Ratzon, Aleph is Ava, Yud is Yira, Taf is Torah, and then when he picked what Shin is, if you would have asked me to guess, I would have said hands down, Shin is Shalom. Rambam says, Shekala Torah Kula Nitna Lasa Shalom Ba'olam. Shenem Adracha Adak Minayim V'chol Nesiva Sel Shalom. We had it in tonight's daf. But no. He skipped Shalom. Instead, he said Shin is Shtika. Can you imagine that? That's how great Shtika is. You know, we like to value things by money. We value a lot of things with money. Yeah. Mila b'sela shtika betray. So the Gemara says, if a word was worth a seller, then being quiet is worth two. Now, I can make the whole shir on this, but I don't want to. I already got carried away. This is no good because just starting the shir and it's already 25 minutes into the shir. That's not good. But it is very important. I want to tell you one story. They used to say over in yeshiva that if you felt a little gaiva, a little arrogance, then you should go to the Svarim Shank and pull out a Stei Chemed. You pull out a Stei Chemed and you see him quote from all over the place. And you say to yourself, I never even heard of these Svarim. And he knows all of them, what they contain. You know, it makes you feel very small. After looking at a Stei Chemed, the fact of the matter is that the Stei Chemed says about himself that he wasn't grasping his learning. He wasn't grasping his learning. He was learning with amazing hasmada, but it wasn't. But he was always in the Beis Medrash, and there were people in the Beis Medrash that were jealous of him. And one person in the Beis Medrash decided that he's getting too much recognition. He's going to fix him. And he gave a nice amount of money to the Goyisha cleaning lady. And she said, oh, you know that boy? In the morning he made a pass at me. And it made a very big tumult. And they threw him out of the Beis Medrash. The Rosh Shiva, the Rosh Kollel, did not believe it for a minute and fired the woman. But the damage was done. Several months later, when the sheikhid, when the bribe, the money got used up, the woman came crying to the Stei Chemed that she needs her job back. And she confessed that she was bribed, and she was willing to try to publicize that she was bribed, just to help her. She's in trouble. So the Stei Chemed said at first he rejoiced at the opportunity to clear his name. But then he thought about it and he realized that it would be a massive chilul Hashem that somebody learning was willing to do such a thing. And he decided that he didn't want to make such a chilul Hashem. And he said he'll try to get her a job, but he forbade her to say it. And he decided to remain quiet instead. He said after he did that, was opened for him all the Mayonas HaChochma. And he became the famous Stei Chemed. That's the power of knowing how to be quiet. I'll tell you, it's not a simple thing. I know, I could tell you, I know from personal experience how hard it is. It's a very hard thing to be quiet when you're wronged, and you know that if you publicize it, you could make your life more geschmack, but other people's lives will be compromised. It's not an easy thing to do. And the only way to be able to do it is to work on it before it becomes negeh. That's why we learn these maimarim. Ma'um nosei shalom, it's such a strange maimar. An umnus? That's an umnus? You have an umnus. You're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're an accountant, you're a broker. Your profession is to be quiet. But the Gemara says this is something that's worth learning like a profession. It's really, really important. Mishpachos b'nei Kahas yachanu al yerech hamizbeach teimana. The family of Kahas was on the eastern, on the side of the Mizbeach to the south. Now, from Kahas came Korach. So Rashi says, Smuchen lebnei Kahas, hayeshevet Ruvain, hachoinim teimana. And because Ruvain was next to Korach, oy l'rasha, oy l'shcheina. Woe to the wicked person, woe to his neighbor. Lekach laku imam dasan v'avirim, u'masayim v'chamishim ish im Korach v'adasai, says Rashi. The 250 people were burnt alive Shenimshechu imam b'machlakusam, because they got swept away because they were near to them. This is what it says in Avos, in the first parak, in Mishnah Zayin. Nitei ha'arbeli amer, harchek mishachen ra, v'al tischaber l'rasha. Says the Rav, distance yourself from a bad neighbor. Don't be friendly with a wicked person. Says the Rav, two reasons. The first reason is obvious. Shalai tilmaid mi maisav, that you should learn from his ways, okay? Right? You don't want your child to be with somebody that is watching the wrong things. You don't want your child to be with somebody that speaks the wrong way. V'shalai tilka imay b'mafaltai, and that you shouldn't be caught when he is punished. I'm going to tell you a maisa. Let's tell you a true maisa, what it means that you shouldn't be in a bad place, you shouldn't be in a bad sviva, not to get caught in their web. It's a true story. Here's a man. He worked in an office. It was a large office, a Jewish office. And people in the office that were on top of him, that were in a different department, but they were his bosses. They were doing wrong things. He had nothing to do with it. But the feds came and they arrested the bosses. And then they said to him, you're going to either testify against them, what you know, or you're going to go to jail. And he asked the big paisik, and the big paisik said, that's pure Masira, and you can't do it. And he went to jail. And he sat in Otisville. Because Oyla Rasha v'Oyla Shneinai. This is the second thing that the Rav is saying. You have to know when you take a job, and when you're around people, you have to be around good people. If you're around bad people, you could fall b'mafalton. You could fall when they fall. Now, it's easy to say, well, listen, I have nothing to do with it. It's a good job opportunity. I'm not occupied in anything. They're adults. They make their own decision. No, you don't attach yourself to people that are not going in the way of Ruach Yisrael Saba. This is a very big lesson that we're learning over here. Because Shevet Ruvain was next to Kahas, they were affected by them. Oyla Rasha, Oyla Shcheina. Every day when we daven, we ask Hashem, please Hashem, V'harchikeinu me adam ra u me chaver ra. Distance us from a chaver ra, from a bad friend, from an adam ra. The Rambam tells us in Hilchos Deis, the Rambam in the 6th parak of Hilchos Deis talks about the inborn attitudes of the human being. These are inborn tendencies. This is the human way. Rambam tells us. Rambam says, Shederech bri'usay shel adam. The Rambam says this is innate. Shederech bri'usay shel adam liyos nimshaych. He is pulled b'dei aisav, in his values, ub'maisav, in his ways, achareyav v'chaveirav, by his friends and associates. V'noye keminig anshe midinaisai, and he practices the way of the people that he lives with. Therefore, Rabbi say, when you choose a yeshiva for your children? You don't want your children to smoke, to vape? Then don't send your child to a yeshiva where there's smoking and vaping. Certainly don't send them to a yeshiva where even the rebbeim smoke. You're not going to expect your child to be more than their mentors. The Rambam says, beferish, Adam is nimshach b'de'aysav v'mamaysav achareya v'chaveira, for sure after the rebbeim. So you could either, lament, well, the rebbeim shouldn't have smoked. But that's passing the buck. The truth is that you have no right to send your child to a yeshiva where the rebbeim smoke. Absolutely your fault. When people go away for the summer, they have to make sure they go to a bungalow colony where people are on their standards of tznius. Because otherwise your children will be impacted by the people, by their chaveirav, by their reyav. That's the way of the world. That's the way it works. I'm going to tell you something even more. There's a Rabbi Yehuda Chassid. Rabbi Yehuda Chassid says that when you go to acquire a friend, after all, it says in Pirkei Avos, Knei l'cha chaver. It's one of the important things. It says when you go to acquire a friend and you want to know, is this person a good candidate to be my friend? Check who that person's friends are. That's what Rabbi Yehuda Chassid says. Because you could tell a person by who their friends are. So if you want to make a friend, even, I used to tell my children that they shouldn't get confused. A wicked person doesn't mean that he's not fun to be around. There are a lot of wicked people that are fun to be around. They're funny. They do fun things. When you're around them, you feel happy. But it's bad for you. You have to teach people this. You have to teach people how dangerous it is to be around. The Chavetz Chaim himself writes that he made a Suda Saidah because he didn't fall in. He almost became very friendly with a bad person. And he escaped it. And he made a Suda Saidah. You would think somebody like the Chavetz Chaim, he would know. He made a Suda Saidah. I'm going to tell you something else now. The Sefer Hasidim writes in Siman Tovshin Ayin that a Yoresh Shemayim should be careful who he sits next to in shul. He says, because if you sit next to a person that's not good, then when that person davens, he might have hirurim roim. And the Shekhinah will not be in that area. Because the Shekhinah will run away. And if you sit next to him, even if you're in shul, Rabbi Yehuda Chassid says you might not be next to Hashem. I want to tell you that Rav Miller, in a beautiful way, he explains the beginning of Tehillim in such a beautiful way. He says, David HaMelech wrote this unbelievable Sefer Tehillim. And he starts it in such a downer. How does he start it? Asher ha'ish eloi halach ba'atzasa risham uva moishev leitzim lo yashav. says, that's the way to start Tehillim. Start Tehillim with something like, Toiv Lo'idos LaHashem. Ulezamer L'Shimcha Elya. Start Tehillim with something eloquent like David HaMelech says, Ani Tfilah. He starts Tehillim with a negative. Asher Ish Shaloi Alach Ba'atzas V'Sham. U'V'Moishav Leitzim Lo Yashav. Says Rav Miller, David HaMelech is teaching you that in your career of davening, the first thing you should choose is don't sit in the wrong place in shul. People come to shul, they take a seat in the back. In the back? When you go to a baseball game, you want to sit in the bleachers? You want to sit right behind home plate where you can see the balls and the strikes. You can see what's going on. So a lot of time, people in the back, they want to schmooze. They want to be far away from the Rav. They want to be able to get out quick. He says, don't make a mistake. You do that, then when they start talking, you're going to talk with them. When they start speaking about how the Rav is talking too long, or it's a canned speech that he said already 3 times, you're going to be listening. It's not good. Not good. Rabbi Yehuda Chassid said, don't make this mistake. It's a big mistake. Now, I'm not saying we have to have room for the Rosh and Shul. It says, Tzibur, it's Tzadikim Beinin and Rishon. But you don't have to sit right next to him. You don't have to sit right next to him. I remember when I was teaching in seminary, and I said, don't marry a boy that smokes. So one of the girls says, what about the boy that smokes? Who's he going to get? I said, that's not your problem. It's not your problem. There's also a boy without a hand. But you don't have to marry a boy without a hand. You don't have to worry. Hashem will have somebody for him. It says in Avos, Perk Beis, Hillel Omer, Al Tifresh Min HaTzibur. Don't separate from the congregation. And don't trust in yourself until the day that you die. So it's interesting, Taisus Yamtiv. Taisus Yamtiv says that this Hillel is not the grandson of Rebbe, but it's Hillel HaZaken, the opponent of Shammai. And when Hillel HaZaken said this Mishnah, he was referring to his Chaver Menachem. Hillel had a Chaver Menachem, but we all know about Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. We don't know about Beis Hillel and Beis Menachem. We know about the arguments of Hillel and Shammai. We don't know the arguments of Hillel and Menachem. What happened? Menachem left. And Nichna Shammai Tachtav. What happened to Menachem? So the Gemara in Chagiga says, Abaya says he went to Tarbis Ra. Rava says he went L'Avodas HaMelech. And the Shoyel Meishiv says they're both true. He went into the service of Hurdas, and when he went into the service of Hurdas, he was affected by palace life, and he went off the Derech L'Tarbis Ra. Somebody as great as Menachem. It says that Menachem had Ruach HaKodesh. He was a great, great, great man. The colleague of Hillel. Person has to watch. I have to tell you that this is really important. Just like Avram Avinu did not want to continue living with light, and that Sari Imenu said that Yishmael cannot live in proximity with Yitzchak, we have to know that a bad friend can cause terrible, terrible havoc. I could tell you a case where a woman got a jogging partner, and every day they jogged together. And after a while, this woman started telling her friend, you're such an intelligent woman. I don't see how you're married to your loser of a husband. I just don't see the two of you together. And the wife said, well, you don't know him. But every day she would say, wasn't the only thing she spoke about. She said, I can't see you together with your husband. You could have done much better. And after a while, it started seeping in. And they ended up getting divorced. This woman that jogged with her was a destroyer. She was a mashkes. But the woman that was jogging with her never saw it. Never saw it. A person has to pray. People pick schools for their children and they look, I have to have a good academics, and I have to have good this, and I have to have good that. The number one thing you have to have is good peers for your children. Because if your daughters are with girls that will start wearing things that are just a little bit above the knee, and just a little bit tight, and just a little bit this, come on, everybody else is wearing them, it's going to have such an impact on your children, more than 1,000,000 shmuzim that you make. That's the Rambam says. That's derech briusav shel adam. Tell you an interesting story. This is a story from Lodz. In Lodz, can't believe how late it is. Can't believe it. Wow. Okay. We have a shir. We do in our shir as much as we can. Right? In Lodz, there was a boy whose friends went into business. And business in those days in Lodz, in the market, was with people that were not from, but he was an aspiring young man, and he also wanted to get out and make his way in the world. And his father said, no, it's too dangerous. And he argued with his father. He said, look, Tati, you're in the business world, you're in this world, you're fine. You sit and learn. I could do the same thing. So it happens to be that the Chavetz Chaim came to town. And the father said to his son, let's go to the Chavetz Chaim and let's ask. So the son was so convinced that he was right, he said right away, okay. So they came, and the father said to the Chavetz Chaim, my son wants to present an argument. So the Chavetz Chaim said, young man, let me hear. So he said, look, I'm of age. I want to soon get married. And I want to see that I should be able to support my family. And I want to go out to the marketplace. And I have a strong home. And my father doesn't, and I see that he's all right. So I feel that it's time for me to do it as well. So the Chavetz Chaim said to him that it says that the Bas Hayana, which is an ostrich, is an arzer. He's a cruel bird. He says, you know why the ostrich is called the cruel bird? He says the ostrich has a very hot temperament. And because of this, the ostrich is even able to eat glass. Zchuches. Ostrich could eat glass. But the ostrich goes ahead and feeds its young glass, not realizing that the young's throat is not yet so strengthened and developed, and it cuts through the throat, and they die. The ostrich is an alzer. He says, your father is already mature. He's already very well grounded in Yerushalayim. He's able to take the avir of the shuk. You're only 15 years old. You're like the young ostriches that would die. Go back to the yeshiva, learn, get more grounded, and it'll be good with you b'zeh u'b'ba, in this world and the next world. Now I have to tell you that this story had a happy ending, because the young man listened. Now I'm going to tell you a story that didn't have a happy ending at all. We know that Rabbi Chanan, Zech Tzav Kosh Vracha, Schus Yagan Aleinu Hashem Yimkim Damai, came to America to collect money for the yeshiva in Baranovich. And he went all around. And when he went to one place, a father from Germany came over to him with his 15-year-old son and said that, he comes from the persuasion of Rav Shamshon Hirsch, Torah Derech Eretz, and it's time to send his son to college to learn a trade. In those days where Yiddishkeit was really very shaky, a lot of people, because of jobs, gave up their Yiddishkeit and Shmir Shabbos. So he wanted a blessing from the Chavetz Chaim, from Rabbi Chanan. Now Rabbi Chanan knew he was talking about somebody who grew up with the derech of Torah and Mada. So the Rabbi Chanan said, "You're right. That Yafa Torah and Derech Eretz and Yegia Shneya and Meshkachas Oven." He says, "You're right." He says to him, "Let me ask you something. Is Mila important?" He said, "Of course Mila is important." He says, the Gemara says, Mila shakal keneged kol ha-Torah kula. Yet, the Gemara says, if Meisu achiv machmas Mila, if your brother died because of Mila, if somebody is a family of a hemophiliacs, you're not allowed to do Mila. He says, we see, and he says, I could tell you from experience, that now we have Meisu achiv machmas malacha. Many people went through the colleges in those days, and they married Goyish girls. They went off the derech. It's Meisu achiv machmas malacha. So I'm telling you, you should not send your child. So it's recorded, and if you want to look it up, it's in the Eitzes Pnini HaTorah, that the father didn't listen to Rabbi Chanan and sent his son, and the son died that year. They say over because it was Kishkaga Yotzim Lefnei HaShalit, because the Rabbi Chanan compared it to Meisu achiv machmas Mila. So the child died. But we have to know that this is the model that we have. I'm not comparing it to college nowadays, and I'm not getting into that discussion. But we have a model how much we have to be concerned about the people that we are living with and that we are affected by. It says that it's a Rabbeinu Ephraim, who was a Rishon. It says, L'Osher Pagiel ben Ochran L'Naftali Achira ben Einon. These are unusual names. So the Rabbeinu Ephraim says that both Osher and Naphtali were in proximity to Shevet Dan. And Shevet Dan had the Pesel Micha, the idol of Micha. It says already that the Pesel Micha was brought through the Yamsuf. That's why it says V'amayim lahem chayma without a vav. Chayma is written without a vav, defective, because V'amayim lahem chayma, the water was angry already because of the Pesel Micha. Says the Rabbeinu Ephraim, because Asher was next to Dan, that's why it says Pagiel ben Ochran. It was Pagael. He was in proximity to the Midas Adin because of the Pesel Micha, which was Oicher, which soured the Bnei Yisrael with Avodah Zarah. and Naphtali was called Achira, the brother of Ra, because they were next to the Pesel of Micha. Now, of course, it's true the other way too. Just like it says, Oile Rasha v'Oile Shchenai, so the same thing, it's Toiv l'Tzadik, v'Toiv l'Shchenai. That's also a Rashi in this week's parsha. In this week's parsha it says, V'achaynin l'fnei ha-mishkan keidma, those that camped before the Mishkan in the east, l'fnei ha'il moed mizracha Moshe v'Aaron ubanav, near Moshe and Aaron, so we know Yehuda, Yisachar, and Zvulun. Well, Yehuda was Mechaykikei, the lawgivers, and Yisachar, Bnei Yisachar, Yodei Bina Le'itim, Yisachar is the Shevet of Torah, and Zvulun was the Shevet that dedicated themselves to support Torah. And this is because, says Rashi, V'soimchim lahem degel machan Yehuda, v'achaynin alav Yisachar Zvulun, because Toiv l'Tzadik and Toiv l'Shchenai. So I want to tell you something. We have to pick our friends wisely. We have to expose our families to good people. My parents sent me to the yeshiva of Staten Island. Because I was sent there, I was exposed to Rav Moshe. I had the opportunity to bring Rav Moshe his Mishnayos for 10 years. Perhaps because of that, I was zeicher to learn Shas Mishnah Yomis on Kol HaLashon, and to have young Talmidim before them a mitzvah finish Shas. But it's because I was exposed to Rav Moshe. Toiv l'Tzadik, Toiv l'Shchenai. People want to know sometimes what to do on a Chol Hamoed. I remember telling people, don't regret it. Go on Thursday night to Rav Miller's shir. There's going to come a day when we're not going to have a Rav Miller, and you're going to regret it. Now people say, oh, I went to a shir by Rav Miller. You know, you take your children to a shir to Rav Miller, and you hear a shir like the 10 Commandments of marriage, and he says one of the 10 Commandments of marriage is to never say, I want a divorce. He says, that's a commandment. I don't care if you're angry. There's certain things that should never come out of your mouth. You hear that from a tzaddik, it impacts you the rest of your life. Take your children, your grandchildren, to be exposed to such people. Then when I learned this about Toiv l'Tzadik, Toiv l'Shchenav, you know, we have a tefillah in Shemona Esrei called Moedim, where we thank Hashem. If you have a wife or a husband that's a Yoreh Shemayim, boy, should you say Moedim. Because if it's true Toiv l'Shachen, then what your wife, who you're with all the time, if your wife is a Yoreh Shemayim, you know how that affects you? If your husband is a Yoreh Shemayim? That's why it's important to try to be good, because you're impacting on your spouse's life like no one else. I didn't get anywhere near to what I wanted to say tonight, but these are important lessons. May we expose ourselves, and may we hang around the right people, and may we be careful the people that we are around, the people that we're responsible for. You hear that your children are talking about moving out of town. If there isn't a good yeshiva where they're moving, you should stop it with all your might. Because you're talking about the future of your descendants. It has to be a good yeshiva. Otherwise, they shouldn't think it. They're moving here, they're moving there. The prices of houses are cheap. First thing is, I don't even know who's going to be your wife's friend. Who's going to be your children's friends? Otherwise, I don't want to even hear about it. Of course, we can't lead our children's lives for them. There's no ways that we could do that. But if we have give them advice, if we're going to give them advice, tell them they want to leave, they want to move to Florida, I want to know, are you going to have a Beis Yaakov with tznius? You're not going to have a Beis Yaakov with tznius? I don't want to even hear about it. You want to move to Dallas? You want to move to Dallas? Okay, tell me what yeshiva is going to be there. So you're thinking about going Aliyah, and you're moving to Beitar? Okay, I want to know, are your children going to have an upgrade in their chinuch or a downgrade? I want to know. This is what we're learning here now. I want to thank you all for joining us. Again, if you would like to sponsor next week's share, 718-916-3100. We learn for Shana Freda Baskisha Fega and Le'ili Nishmas, Rabbi Wallerstein, Rabbi Zechariah Shimon, Ben Rabbi Yitzchak HaKohen. Have a good Shabbos and a good Yom Tov.